Well, hey, everybody, glad to be back with you again. And David, today's topic is probably pretty interesting, maybe something people haven't thought much about if they're a fiction author. And we're going to talk about how to create a course from a fiction book.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've met plenty of people who are, I tell people all the time, so the way to monetize your book is to create courses, to create coaching around your book.
Right.
That's how you're going to monetize it because, books are incredible tools to build your business. Let's be honest. Being a published author, having all this out there as like you're a subject matter expert on this, or you've written an actual, story on all these things.
Hmm.
It's an incredible feather in your hat.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. It's a great thing, but the reality is books in and of themselves don't generate a lot of income.
Hmm.
They can, but it's like for the 0.000001% of the authors out there.
Right. Not everybody's going to be J.K. Rowling.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's the problem. There's like 5 of those,
Right.
level authors in the
John
world,
Grisham.
and there's millions of authors writing books, and
Right.
so you got to keep those numbers in mind. And so I learned a long time ago that the average author sells about 250 copies of their book in their lifetime.
Right.
And they typically make $2 to $4 a book ish. I mean, it depends on the book, depends on the situation. That obviously can vary a little bit depending on how much your book sells for and
Right.
everything. And so it can be, but if you do the math on that, let's say you get $4 a book. Let's
Right.
say you're on the high end of that range, like you're selling books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all these other places, and you're getting $4 a book, which still drives me nuts to think that these booksellers are selling a book for $20 and the person who did all the work to create it only gets 2 to 4. I'm like,
Right.
wow, that's a bad business
As an
model.
author, I can tell you when people say, "Oh, can I just grab your book on Amazon?" I'm like, "You can, but please don't." I have some copies. I'll show you
Yeah,
mine.
yeah.
Because
I
they don't
can
let I mean,
fully
honestly, even people that wanna support you, they don't understand that.
right. And that fairly consistent from yours as well on
Oh, yeah,
Amazon.
like, absolutely. I mean, I honestly, I very rarely even worry too much about looking at my book sales, like, on off of Amazon because the amount of money I earn from that is so small. To me,
Right.
like I said, I find ways to sell my book personally, whether it's at speaking engagements or, to people, I talk to, and just have copies available, because I can get them from the printer at a certain cost and then I can make, for me, I make about $10 per book when I sell it versus,
Okay.
like you said, 4 or whatever it ends up being,
Right.
depending on. And then the other thing is, like Amazon, they'll drop your price someday. Like
Yeah.
maybe you're selling your book for $15. Now it's down. All of a sudden, you look on there and it's like it's $4.99, and it's like, and I'm sure they do that to some level for, they're trying to, they try to attract buyers on one,
But
but
now your profit
now my
margin is
percentage is
pennies.
like pennies.
Right. You're sub dollar at that point. You're
Exactly.
in the
So,
business
and I'm a
to keep pennies.
nonfiction author, obviously. So I'm not speaking on this topic today from experience of a fiction book, but
Right.
I think the same is still true when you're talking about just book sales in general.
It is. And this is what I tell people. So when you think about that, let's say you are the average author who sells 250 copies of their book in their lifetime. And let's say you made $4 a book. That's $1,000.
Right. That's not going to get you too far.
And it's one thing to make $1,000. It's another thing to make $1,000 selling a book.
Right.
Because if you went somewhere and worked for the weekend, got paid $1,000, okay, that's one thing. But
Right.
you're not going to write, produce, get all the things done for a book. I mean, usually you spend more than that on an editor to have an
Oh,
editor
sure. Yeah.
go through your book, and you could spend two, three,
And your design,
$4,000.
the cover design, interior
Right,
design, all the things.
right, and all of those things to get your book published. So you have more, not only all your time and labor and
Mhm.
that you put into it, because that can take you, most authors, except for you, who seem to have this down to you can crank out a book in a couple months, or a couple weeks even. But most authors, they, write part-time while they're doing their full-time job, whatever that may be. And they're writing on the side, and it could take them a year to get a book written. A little bit here and a little bit there in the gaps and spaces of their time, they get a book written. And And so you have all this time, then you have all the expense of the editing and the production of the book and the cover design, as you said, and all you get back from it is $1,000. And you quickly realize this is very discouraging, and there's people out there, especially a lot of these fiction authors, who just love to write stories. They love to tell stories. They have these stories inside them they want to get out, and but they're just incredibly discouraged. So they're kind of resigning themselves to this track of, hey, I guess I'm just going to write, and this is just going to be kind of an expensive hobby that I have, because I want to write the stories. I want to get the stories out of me and onto paper, but I'm always going to be, I'm always going to be in the red. I'm always going to be going backwards financially when I do this. All my work is not going to generate any income whatsoever. In fact, it's going to cost me money to do this all the time. And so a lot of them just resign themselves. Well, if this is what I want to do, this is just how it is. It's not, I can't really get much from it. So, and so then I meet these people all the time, because obviously, we used to run a publishing company, and a lot of those people that came in, there's a decent number that wanted to write a fiction book. Great. And then we would tell them, like, well, create a course around your fiction book. And they just look at you like, what? What are you talking about? You can't create a course. You can't create coaching around a fiction book. I'm like, you want to bet? Yes, you can. And they start almost even fighting with me. They start arguing with me. They are like, no way. Yeah, this doesn't work. It's not possible. And this is, and this is something that I look at and go, yeah, it very much is. And in our last business that I had, the guy I was working with, we did this. He wrote actually a teen fiction book, and we took that teen fiction book and turned it into a course, and we sold that course for multiple six figures worth of sales. I mean, now think about that versus all your work for like $1,000, right? Or would you rather have multiple six figures worth of sales to compensate you for that effort? Well, where did all the money come? All the money came from the course. And so people are like, well, how does that work? How can you sell a course based on a fiction book? Well, in all honesty, it's not as hard as you think. It really isn't, because here's the deal. Most every fictional story has a main character, right? It has somebody as the main centerpiece of that story. This is the main character that you have in your story. So this main character goes on some type of journey in their life, and now it doesn't need to be a literal journey. It doesn't need to be like a journey to another land or to another place. It could be, maybe they're on a journey to become a professional athlete or a singer, or maybe they want to always work in this certain field and they are struggling to get in, or maybe they're starting to start a business, or maybe they want to have a relationship with this one person and it's just always a struggle. But there's this journey of some sort that they all go on. There's something that they're embarking upon in their life. So they go on this journey, and as they go on this journey, they always encounter some type of conflict. Like if your main character goes on this journey and says, okay, Johnny went and wanted to go to this foreign land. He went to the land and came back home. The end. Like, okay, that's not a story. That's your story. You need to go back and learn how to write a little bit better than that, because that's a story that's not a good story. Every good story, there's conflict. Okay. There's something that happens that's an obstacle. There's something that happens that's standing in between the person and the dream that they have. There's something standing out there that's like keeping them from achieving what they want, keeping them from realizing the dream that they have, and it can be one of three things. It can be an external obstacle. Like maybe there's something in their circumstances that is keeping them from moving forward. Maybe they have a disability. Maybe they have people, or maybe there's just circumstances. Maybe, they're, trying to go and achieve something that's never been done before, and all the circumstances are stacked against them. Maybe there's just all these obstacles out there. The other type of obstacle, the second type, is another individual. and you see those in like all the superhero movies, right? The superhero comes and he's trying to keep people safe, but there's this villain that enters in that always is trying to do something awful, who's always trying to create chaos and hurt people and cause damage and do all these things. So the superhero is always having to fight against the villain. There's this other individual, this other person who is battling, who's always causing trouble, that they have to defeat this foe for them to be able to realize their dream.
Right.
And then the third type of obstacle that happens is themselves. So, and this is situations where this should resonate. If the other two don't resonate with you, this should resonate with everyone.
Right.
But doubt, discouragement, not believing that you can do it. If you've ever watched a movie where somebody who comes from a very disadvantaged background, you've seen movies like this as well, where or read books like this, where somebody comes from a very disadvantaged background. They've been beaten down. They've been told they're worthless. Yep. They've been told they'll never be able to succeed, that no one, they're just some poor little, loser that's never going to get anywhere in life. They're never going to achieve anything. They're never going to succeed. So who do you even think that they are? Who do you think you are? What do you do? Why are you even trying? And yet this person just feels this burning inside of them. I have to try. I have to try. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I need to try and do. But so many of their battles are internal. Their own doubt, their own, lack of confidence in themselves, their own unbelief that it could really happen for them. All of those are things that they're battling internally all the time to try and achieve what it is they know they're supposed to achieve. And so those are every main character goes through one of those things. And many of them go through all three.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
A really good story will have all three elements. Like I'm trying to think of what's the movie about the Mercy Me singer? Do you remember?
I can only imagine.
Yes. I can only imagine. That story is the one that's popping into my head right now, because I remember that he grew up in a situation where his mother died. His dad was basically a drunk and didn't support him in anything. He grew up in, I think it was Oklahoma. I think
somewhere out there.
I think in that area, very poor, lives in a little shack in the country, doesn't have any connections, doesn't have any resources to speak of. He's poor as dirt, and obviously he's filled with doubt and a lot of internal issues because of all his difficult upbringing and the fights that he would get into with his dad and how that conflict is always there. And he's trying to prove himself. And at the end of that story, when he achieves it, when he finally gets on stage and shows what he's really made of how great he is, what does that do to your heart, Chris? I mean,
it brings tears to your eyes, right?
Right. And that's the nature of a good story.
Yeah.
When you write a story like that, where they have overcome all of those obstacles, where they have faced another individual, like his father, who was opposing him big time to becoming a singer. His father fought him. His father wanted to play football because he was a big kid, and wanted to know, what are you wasting your time singing all the time? And especially, the type of music he was singing. His father didn't want that either. And so all of these things are out there. And at the end, I was the same way. I had tears in my eyes watching that movie. And that story is so powerful because of how much he overcame, all the obstacles that he overcame. And those stories can move you. And yet what we fail to sometimes see and fail to sometimes connect the dots on is those stories can be some of the most powerful teaching tools in the world. Those stories can change lives. And you can turn those stories into courses simply by going through the journey of your main character. So let's say, your main character is like this guy who's the lead singer of Mercy Me. I can't remember. Do you remember his name? I'm like
not offhand now.
I'm blanking on it, but he was a person that had to learn all these lessons along the way. He had to learn how to overcome doubt. He had to learn how to overcome discouragement. Well, all you really need to do is you need to go through and you need to document all of the things that your main character learned. You need to go through and, like, where did your main character start? And then where did your main character end up? Okay, now document the journey. And you've pretty much already done that. But what you need to document is, what are all the lessons that were learned all along the way in this? What are all the things that he learned as he was going through all these struggles? All the pain that he felt, all the struggles, all the difficulty. What are all the lessons that were learned? What are all those things that he suddenly said, you know what? I know better than that now. That's no longer going to stop me. That's no longer true. That's no longer going to be an issue for me. I'm going to move past that, because now I know the truth about this.
Yeah.
Now I know the truth about that. All of those are life lessons. And what you have to realize and remember is that when you're the person who's reading your story in your fiction book, when they're reading the story, they're not just passively consuming it. Okay. If you've written a really good story, they're kind of living it. I mean, have you ever, I'm assuming you've done this as well, Chris. Have you ever watched a movie or read a story where there's one character in that story that you really are rooting for?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you have that one character
that you start to identify with them, right?
That's the word I was going for.
Yeah,
exactly. You identify with that character. You and that character have created a bond in a way. You're looking at that character's life going, wow, that's amazing. I am facing similar challenges in my life, in my own unique circumstances. My circumstances are different than what the main character in this story is, but I'm facing challenges like that too. And you start identifying with that character. You're rooting for that character to succeed, to overcome, to get past these things, because you want to succeed.
Yeah.
You want to succeed in your own life, so you want that character to succeed as well, because you're feeling that connection. You're feeling that bond between you and the story. And these are the things that are so powerful with fiction books. So when you do that and you start teaching the principles, okay, you're no longer going into your course and teaching the story. You're teaching all the principles that were learned throughout this entire journey, because what happened was that character grew as a human being as a result of going through all these challenges. This wasn't just that, this character faced these difficulties and overcame them, and he was the same person at the end as he was at the beginning.
Right.
Never works that way.
Yeah.
This person, when they come out the other side, are stronger. They're more capable. They're more confident. They're more certain of themselves. They're probably more compassionate. They're more empathetic. They're just better human beings because of the difficulty and the struggle that they went through.
Yeah.
Because they had to go through that pain, and now that shaped them into something that is a far better version of themselves than the version that was there when they first started this journey. Those are all principles that can be taught. You can take all those principles and turn them into a course. You can take all that and say, and start identifying, and instead of just telling the story about the main character, you can reverse it and say, now, what about you? Do you have situations in your life like this? Let's identify them. Who and what are the obstacles in your life? Now, just as the main character went through this part of the journey, what is it for you? What are your struggles? What are the pain points for you? Where are you doubting yourself? Where are you feeling inadequate? Where are you feeling like you don't have what it takes? What can you learn from so-and-so's story that will help you to be inspired to not only believe that it's possible, but to believe in yourself? All of these stories are great, powerful teachings. I mean, like, how did Jesus do almost all of his teaching in the New Testament?
Stories, parables.
Stories. Almost everything he taught, almost everything that he taught, every quote unquote course that he gave, which in many ways he was teaching lessons all the time.
Sure.
But the way he taught lessons is by telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
He told story upon story upon story. That was how he taught. So to tell me that you can't take those lessons out of those stories and create a course, like, you're just not thinking deep enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're not thinking clearly and strongly enough about what you're actually creating and doing. You can create coaching programs out of that.
You know what's funny about this, David, as I'm listening to you, is for those of us who are nonfiction authors or coaches, that have courses, the thing that we have to think about, and I had a speaking coach one time years ago say, tell a story, then make a point, tell a story, then make a point, or make a point, then tell a story, right? It's either way. But the whole point was, don't just dump a bunch of information on people, but tell stories to connect the point and to show people how it really plays out. And so now when you think about it from the angle we're going from today of being a non or a fiction author telling stories, you're already doing the very important connecting point.
Right.
But it's a matter of drawing out the lesson that we're talking, like, that the course comes into. So, for me, when I'm putting together a presentation to go speak or to do a training, with a team, I have to think about stories. I have to think about examples to bring out and say, this is an example of how this works out, or this is how, this is a story of somebody that did this. I have to think about it in reverse of a fiction author, but the fiction author, it just takes a little bit of time to think, okay, I'm telling this story. Now I have to think more like a teacher, whereas a teacher has to think more like a storyteller or author.
Mm-hmm. Those two are absolutely very intricately connected.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that from many years of public speaking. The best way, like, if you just start teaching from the stage, what do you notice when you look out in the audience?
Their eyes glaze.
Their eyes glaze and their heads start dropping because they're starting to fall asleep on you.
Right.
What happens when you start mixing in stories?
Yeah, people are kind of on the edge of their seat. They
started re-engaging. You start ticking
into and once again, it connects with people, and they're like, you know what? I identify with that story you shared.
Right. And this is why when I hear people say, well, I could never create a course from a fiction book, I could never create a coaching program from a fiction book, I'm like, you people who create these books are some of the most creative people I know.
Right.
Use a little bit of that creativity to think outside the box for this, because you're sitting on a lot of money that's untapped.
But don't you think, David, that part of it is we don't, to me, I think it goes back to beginning with the end in mind. And I think as authors, if the end in mind is, I just want to sell a book, it gives us a very short-sighted view, because we don't give ourselves enough room to realize I can speak on this, I can teach on this, I can create courses on this, like we're talking about. Whereas if a fiction author said, I'm going to write a story about this character and this is the theme, and they have the idea, but then they already say, you know what, and then I can teach my readers through a course, or I can go speak to audiences about this topic. And I have a friend who wrote, it's basically a memoir of her story, of her journey that's been very challenging over the years. But she is asked to speak all the time now on the topic of hope.
Yeah.
So her teaching, and she's taught and she's been a teacher, but now she's a newer author, but she sells a lot of her books, but she's also asked to speak a lot about her, the journey she was on, because her story, the story is her story, right? So it's not fiction, it's real life, but it's a memoir. But when she goes and speaks, then she sells books. So, but once again, it's this idea that the core message is how to find hope in the midst of your challenges. And her story is, her book is about her story of having to navigate all that. So so that's even a memoir, but it's very similar to what we're talking about today. Is she could just left it at a book and hope for people to buy the book. But now, I told her when she was writing this book, because I got to be one of her beta readers early on, and I said, you better be ready, because people are going to call you like crazy to speak to their, like, women's groups, or, she's speaking at Rotary Club. Like, people are all over now asking her to come speak. Like, way beyond the scope of what I even thought might be her audience.
And that's just it, because people, I'll even take it to this point. The best way to teach someone is to tell a story.
Mhm.
So not only
Sometimes
can
you
you,
just have to point out the lessons after the story to make
right,
sure.
right,
I mean, Jesus, you mentioned Jesus. So Jesus did this, right? One of the best was he told the story of the four soils in one of his parables, and his disciples came to him afterwards and said, "What did all that mean?" So he told the story about a farmer
and then it
scattering
taught the
seed,
lesson. Right.
and his disciples that were his closest friends said, "Okay, I don't, we're missing something here. Teach us, about this." And he said, "Okay, the first soil is this." Like, and he went through. He had four
Right.
types of people he was talking about, right? But the ground was the heart of the people. So
Right.
so he told the story, and he then explained the lessons. To
Mhm.
your point.
Well, and that's just it. But that's what makes it so powerful. And that's why I'm
Mhm,
like, the people who are writing fiction stories are sitting on a gold mine,
mhm,
untapped resources and untapped earnings potential,
mhm.
because they've locked themselves into a box of, I'm a storyteller.
Right,
Okay. I'm not saying you're not a storyteller,
right,
but you could be even more than that if you wanted to.
right.
You could take this even further if you wanted to,
Mhm,
because there's a whole lot more to this than just that. And this is where I just look at it and go, if you will open your mind and you open your heart to a few possibilities beyond simply, I just write stories and I just write books, and I'm never going to make a nickel from it. I'm just going to, this thing's going to put me in the red endlessly. I'm just going to constantly, this is going to be a constant lose for me. If you'll just open your mind and you open your heart up to some extra possibilities, you'll realize I can teach these lessons.
mhm.
I can help people apply these lessons to their own lives. And when you do that, when you do that, all of a sudden you've opened up a whole new world.
But I
And
think a big part of it is to what you just said too is it's an identity shift as an author that I'm not just a fiction author, a fiction writer. I am a teacher who writes fiction.
right,
And when you see that, because you're teaching those lessons through the story theme, the storyline, and I think once again, I think it's just we get short-sighted or we have tunnel vision, especially when we start and we don't understand these things. We don't see we need those examples out there around us, right? And and it does seem like a foreign concept, because I mean, even a nonfiction author, it's easy for most people think once again, I'm just going to write a book and sell books online. But if you really dissect the most popular nonfiction authors out there, what are they doing? They're speaking. They have courses. They're not just monetizing book sales. Now, even even the bigger, truly published authors that are getting big book deals, I follow John Maxwell for 25 years of my life or more now, right? John sold a lot of books. He's been that New York Times bestseller. He's got the big book deals from the big publishing companies, traditionally, all that. But people pay him like $100,000 a day to come speak. He travels all over the world for the last 40 years speaking and training and coaching people. Yes, his books help promote that. His books are really a lead generator for a lot of that opportunity, but he didn't just settle for writing a book. He saw the possibility of I can have a digital course once even, now it's all online, but even before he was selling video cassettes or cassette tape, audio less like it was always packaged, right? And you see other authors doing that more, more and more. I mean, um, I think of Simon Sinek. He's a very popular nonfiction author, but people know Simon Sinek mostly because they've watched his YouTube videos of his speaking engagements that he's been brought to conferences and stuff, right? So he's probably making a good amount of money on his books now because he's got big book deals with publishers. Because, but the
right.
reality is, I mean, think about J.K. Rowling. Like she turned that her book. Yes, she really has sold a lot of books, but think about all the products that go alongside the Harry Potter series, right? Like
The
that's where
money
she's
came from
made
the
her
movies, I'm
money.
sure. The money really came from the movies, I'm
Right,
sure.
the movies and yeah, but, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I know honestly, I know somebody locally that she's been writing, like, early teen fiction, and Netflix got a hold of her stories and wanted to do, a series of movies based on
Mhm.
her stories. But now she wasn't creating a course like we're talking about today, but I guess the point I wanna make is don't pigeonhole yourself into just the book, right?
There's a lot of other opportunities out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're I mean, folks, I guess the point that we wanna wrap up with today is think about how would you walk somebody through your hero's journey, right? Your character's journey in your book, because David's laid this out for us today, like what has that person gone through? What are the obstacles they faced? How did they overcome those obstacles? When you think that through and
What
you
lessons
basically,
did they learn? Right.
yeah, the lessons you learn, like map it out, right?
Right.
So David,
Absolutely.
this isn't as hard as maybe people are going to think it is initially, right?
No, it's been staring him in the face the entire time.
Hmm.
Let's just be honest. The opportunity is sitting there, staring them right in the face the whole time. They just have to embrace it and
Hmm.
realize it's there. They could, but think about it this way: instead of selling a book that makes you a couple bucks, you could sell a course that makes you $300 or $400.
Right.
Well, all of a sudden now you have enough money coming in that you're actually getting paid for your time.
Yeah.
And you can sell courses just as easily as you can sell books in a lot of ways,
Yep.
you know?
Well, and think about it. If you do this, right, you have your book, and let's say you get asked to go speak and share about your book. Well, guess what? You could sell your books at that event, most likely. But if you had a course as well, you can, have a flyer with
Mm,
information about that course and say, you know what,
right.
there's all the lessons that are learned throughout the story. I actually have a course around that to help anybody to
And
go through this journey.
how you can apply it to your own life.
Right. And it's, so you can buy that here. I mean, it's a game changer financially for an author.
I agree 100%. It's all out there if you're willing to think a little bit outside the box and be a little extra creative, which a fiction author shouldn't struggle with.
Yeah. Well, you're right, but once again, it's that whole idea of what it's kind of like what has been modeled for us, right? Like we
Mhm.
see, most people don't. I think somebody's saying, "Well, my book turned into a movie." People see that regularly, so that might be a dream of an author, right?
Right.
But a lot of people haven't seen my a fiction book turned into a course because that hasn't been as predominant. It's not, well, at least it's not as public, I'll say,
Right.
and in
Well,
front of
and
everybody.
it's a lot bigger hurdle to get over to get a movie produced
Correct.
than it
Yeah.
is than it is to create a course.
Oh,
So
that's 100%. The bar is
this
much
this
lower.
is this is far more achievable for the average fiction author than hoping Hollywood picks up your story and makes a movie out of it.
And what's crazy is the book you had mentioned at the beginning, in your previous business, to be honest, the book wasn't great,
No, it wasn't.
but the
I,
course was
I,
very, but I went through the course. I was a buyer of that course, and the
Mhm.
course was very helpful to me.
Right, and I even had my sons read it, who at the time were exactly the age group of that
The target
what the,
audience.
that they were perfectly inside the target audience, and they were both like, meh. So
Mhm.
it doesn't even need to be a great fiction book
Right.
because that one wasn't. It
I mean, you
wasn't a
don't
great
want it to you wanna write good books, don't get us wrong,
right,
folks, but
right. But
even
you could still make it
a
work
meh
even
kinda
then.
book still had
Right,
very great success
right,
with the course.
exactly.
So, folks, if we can help you really outline this, figure this out, and if you're struggling with how to turn your fiction book into a course, this is something that we can certainly help you with inside our Design Launch Grow coaching program. We have training videos, we have weekly coaching calls, we have a supportive community of people that are there to encourage you, people that are a few steps ahead, even that have seen this. They've said, "Hey, I can do this." So join us at designlaunchgrow.com. We'd love to help you out. It's something that we really are passionate about because a lot of times, David, it's just that you just need that outside perspective
Mhm.
because we get so stuck in our tunnel vision ways, right, of our thing that we're doing. And sometimes it's just simply a question we can ask on a coaching call, or you hear somebody else telling their story about what they're doing in their business, and you're like, hey, I can do that. And that's really what Design Launch Grow. You get that one-on-one support on our weekly calls when we do our group coaching calls, but you also get that, I'll say, expanded vision throughout the community and the support and people who know what you're going through and have probably been there already. So check us out. We'd love to have you join us and help you out with your fiction book turn into a very highly profitable course. So until next time, we'll see you soon. Hope you have a great day.